Welcome to League of Lit, where we discuss books, adaptations, and anything else we wish to talk about and tie it back to lit, because we can.
Yeah. I've been excited for this because I read this whole entire series in like third grade, and I was obsessed with it.
I would say that while most people would say that Harry Potter is the series of their childhood, this was honestly the series of mine. Because oddly enough, even though like there's massive amounts of like magic and fantasy in this series, I was allowed to read this one because of the faith-based connections that it has.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, like I love it. And reading it as an adult is honestly such an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was definitely like I don't think I've read it in years. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna read. And then I was reading it and I was like, it's just like a slightly different perspective, which has a lot to do with the fact that it's about children, I think.
I mean, it would be technically classified as a children's book or a children's series, only because, though, that the main characters are children.
Yeah.
That's honestly how genres get decided.
There's a lot of more adult motifs in it, though, that you don't get to until you are an adult.
Yes. And to catch everyone else who is listening to us, this is to be the first episode of several talking about the Chronicles of Narnia.
Currently, today only, we're going to be talking about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yes. I guess we're going to go in publication order with this. I don't know that we've actually decided on that. Because The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the first of the series to be published, but chronologically, it is the second book.
Yes. And I think we did talk about going in order and then doing, just because I feel like people read them that way. I read them that way. I had them in a giant, I don't have it anymore, but I had them in a giant book. And oddly enough, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was still first in the book.
Interesting. See, I have one of those, like, has all 7 books in one, and it has it in chronological order. And growing up, we had a radio, like the BBC radio dramatization of it that I listened to several times over. And those were done in chronological order.
It's weird the way that I guess some different publications choose to do different things.
But at the same time, I think part of the reason why we chose to start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, besides it being the more widely known of the series, is that it has, of the most recent, like, going over and making adaptations from it, it was the first to be remade.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But before we get into the book and then subsequently the movie, it is a truth universally acknowledged that we are not a spoiler-free podcast. So we will be talking about all the things that happen. We're going to tell you what happens to Aslan, and you better be prepared.
You just got to be ready for all of it, because this is a little bit of a roller coaster depending on how connected you actually are to the series, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But a little bit of background. This entire series is written by C.S. Lewis, or Clive Staples Lewis, if you actually want to know what the C and the S stand for. But he was also affectionately known as Jack to his friends.
I didn't know that the S stands for Staples.
Yes.
What a name. All right, bruh.
C.S. Lewis is literally like one of my favorite authors. I've read so much of his stuff.
I like C.S. Lewis because I feel like a lot of people compare his writing style, or sort of contrast his writing style with with Tolkien,
which they were friends. So
were.
It's not out of the ordinary for that to be similar, because they were a part of a writing group.
Yeah, it's similar, but where Tolkien is really loquacious and spends a lot of time on one particular thing, like a single blade of grass is like 4 pages. C.S. Lewis does not feel the need to do that and still creates the fantastical world.
Right. So the book was published October 16th, 1950, and it's set in England during World War II, and obviously in the land of Narnia, because we eventually get there. But like where we start the story, it's taking place during World War II. There are air raids that are happening, and our four main characters, the Pevensies, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, they are evacuated to a professor's house to make sure that they're taken care of during this time. I would like to note the dedication for this book. It is to Lucy Barfield, which is Lewis's goddaughter. And this is where one of C.S. Lewis's like most famous quotes of "Someday you will be old enough to start reading fairy tales again." That is where this comes from, is the dedication to this book.
I like that. And obviously, like, she inspired the whole person. So, Lucy Pevensey.
Well, it's like when he started writing it, she was still a child. And the whole like dedication covers the fact that she's not a child anymore. And so therefore she may not feel like she can actually read it because, oh, well, this is a kid's book. Because people have those weird things about reading things that are meant for your age.
Mm-hmm.
There's no shame in reading whatever you want to read.
Truly. I read crappy romance novels. Like, there's no shame.
I read a ton of YA novels. Like,
YA novels are so good, though.
But the only reason why they're YA is because of the age of the main character. It has absolutely nothing to do with the content of the book.
Yeah, no, I agree. So they go and stay with Professor Kirk, which you've already said. And essentially, I mean, the whole first chapter is literally Lucy looks into the wardrobe.
Yes. And it's interesting seeing how each adaptation takes that moment. And we will talk about that when we talk about each adaptation in a little bit. But just to kind of be giving an overview, because we more than likely do not have enough time. As much as we'd love to have enough time to dive into the book, maybe we'll do a book discussion, because we like surprising people with random book discussions. That's bonus content. And if you want to know what that is, you can make sure you go to our Tumblr, leagueoflit.tumblr.com. We always have any extra content that we might have available there.
Yeah, we'll just give sort of an overview. So Lucy steps into a wardrobe and essentially finds a whole nother world and meets Mr. Tumnus, who is a faun. He is like, this is a human. It's confusing because there are no humans in Narnia at this point.
Which they refer to humans in Narnia as sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, which is obviously a very like strong like biblical connection. But that's one of the things that I think is really cool about Lewis's writing is it's very obvious in the fact that he is connecting this to faith.
Oh, very obvious.
He's not trying to hide it at all, where some people have their own opinions of how like biblical allusions work. This is so like strong and rich in those allusions and connections, and I think it's absolutely wonderful because it's one of the ways that I've actually been able to understand my faith so much better.
And Mr. Tumnus takes her to his house, explains that essentially in Narnia, where they are, they've had like 100 or so years of winter because
I don't
the White
know that
Witch.
The book actually ever states.
I feel like they say it in the movie, and that's probably where I'm getting that from. My notes
in
do not
the
say
2005
where
adaptation.
it says,
It's identified how long it's been, but I don't know that in the book it's ever actually stated how long it's been that they've been in winter. And literally every time I like see an adaptation of it or read the book, and it's talking about how it's always winter and never Christmas, I think of the song by Reliant K that has that specific phrase in parentheses. I think the part that's out of parentheses is in like a lion. It's literally a beautiful song and I love it. And it reminds me of Narnia and it makes me happy.
Essentially, they don't have humans in Narnia because I don't know, there just aren't, I guess.
It's never actually stated.
Yeah, it's never actually stated like
to humans.
If they just don't live in Narnia, because obviously they live in other places. If you get to other books, there are humans.
You have that, and you also have from like The Magician's Nephew, you know that there are humans from that point. But obviously at the time because this is the first book that was published, that wasn't necessarily known.
Yeah, and C.S. Lewis is like, we'll get to it. And Mr. Tumnus essentially helps her escape the White Witch because, the White Witch, She doesn't like humans, and we'll find out why later.
Essentially, the White Witch calls herself the Queen of Narnia. She is the reason as to why we have, why it's always winter and never Christmas. And she is very obsessed with this prophecy of there being 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve that are going to sit on the 4 thrones at Cair Paravel, which is like the official castle of Narnia. Because once that happens, then her reign is absolutely over. Like the magic hold that she has on the land is going to be done. Like spring will return. Like they will actually have 4 seasons in Narnia when this happens. So for her, it's a power grab kind of deal.
Yeah, it's literally like, I must get rid of any human that comes into Narnia because they are the possibility of ruining me. And she leaves the wardrobe, comes back to her brothers and sisters who don't realize that she went anywhere because time in Narnia moves much faster than it does in our world. And they do not believe her at all. They're like, there's nothing.
And it shows a little bit of the character of each of the children. And when we actually like get into the adaptations, I have opinions about all of that because they take one specific character in a direction that I'm not sure I agree with in one of the adaptations. But again, We'll get there when we get there.
Okay.
But essentially, like, it takes a total of like 3 times for it to be all 4 Pevensies that enter into Narnia. And it's in the 3rd time that they enter in that they are like, okay, well, we actually have to stay. We have to do something about this because things have gone bad because of Lucy's first initial time that she showed up. And then they get to see Aslan. They hear about Aslan and the prophecies that exist, and that even though they don't necessarily see themselves as like the heroes and the saviors of their world, of this world that they have never ever heard of, it becomes more apparent to them that no, this is what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And it's never actually stated in the book how old each of the Pevensies are, other than they are school aged. And I think the only little like close bit that we ever get of like actually establishing any relativity to the ages is that Edmund is a year older than Lucy,
which is like super helpful information.
Like that's the closest we get to knowing what their ages are, because that was one of the things that I was curious about when it came time for casting decisions.
Yeah. How they make those choices.
Right. Because it's not like, oh, well, it says that like Edmund is 10 and Susan is 13. Like, it doesn't say that.
I guess they just kind of have to make the choice of do they want to do all sort of younger? Do they want to try a little bit older and see what happens?
Right. And when I was doing some research trying to figure out, I was like, how did they actually like decide this stuff? Apparently C.S. Lewis had like made a statement. I have yet to actually like find said statement where it's like, no, these are actually the ages. I know what I said in my book, but like these are actually the ages of these kids. And it puts Lucy about 8, Edmund about 10, and I want to say Susan and Peter are like 14 and 15. I want to say is what I read. I don't exactly remember. Either way, it's not like they're all really close in age.
Yeah.
It's not like it was literally, oh, it's 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah. There's still definitely that distinction of you have older to younger.
Right. And I always, like, every time I've read the book, I've never really perceived specifically Peter to be older than like 15 or 16.
No, and that is a lot of the way that C.S. Lewis wrote him. He's definitely, I feel like he fits into that, because at that point, you know, their dad's off at war. He's the man of the house. He definitely fits into that sort of, I have to be the man, but I'm also still a boy.
Yeah.
Sort of mentality. Because of the way, especially the way he treats Edmund.
Right. It's like, and I feel like that puts him in that like 14 to 16 age range.
I agree.
Of just like, well, because it's that weird time of like, well, technically he is becoming a man because he's in that stage of life to become one. But because of his dad being off at war, he doesn't necessarily have that this is how you become a man kind of thing, because that's just how war works, unfortunately. But it always seems like Peter and Susan are closer in age.
And Edmund and Lucy are closer in age.
Right. Just in the relationship specifically that it seems that Peter and Susan have.
Yeah.
Where almost everything leading up to when Edmund actually meets Aslan, do you actually get, like, everything that you see of Edmund just kind of shows that he is kind of like on his own. He doesn't really get along with anybody. But it seems a little bit by design / his own fault.
Yeah. He sort of is what you would consider like the black sheep of the family in a way.
Yeah.
Which is of his own choice in a lot of ways. And also slightly because I feel like he's got an older brother. He's got, an older sister and a younger sister. So he's almost the middle child without being a middle child.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they all end up in Narnia and they meet the beavers, who are wonderful people. They're not people, they're beavers. So when they're with the beavers, sort of getting the story of the prophecy and why they're here and everything, Edmund leaves because when the second time that Lucy came into Narnia, Edmund also ended up in Narnia and met the White Witch, who essentially lied to him in many ways and was like, I am the queen and I am wonderful and I will give you Turkish delight and you can bring
Which
your
is disgusting,
siblings to
by the
me.
way.
It's disgusting. I'm so sorry to anybody who likes Turkish delight. It's gross.
Fun fact. In all of my homeschool glory, when I did classes with other homeschooled kids, because, those co-op groups exist, I took a class specifically on this book. And at the end of the semester, we got to pick which projects we want to do. And someone in the class made Turkish delight. So that is what for my basis of why it is disgusting, because I've tried it and I did not like it.
And so Edmund goes to the White Queen without his siblings, even though that's what she asked him to do.
I think that goes into his greediness of wanting Turkish delight.
I think he's like, I am going to be the one. That's the whole thing with Edmund, I feel like, is he's like, I'm finally going to be the one who's important. And so then his siblings are going to have to rescue him. Because,
which is honestly that catalyst
happy.
moment of, because at that point, Peter and Susan are like, no, we can't do this. We really should get home. This is not what we were supposed to be doing. And the fact that they now have to rescue Edmund from a fate worse than death, more than likely death.
Yeah.
It's the whole reason why they end up going to Aslan.
Yes. And so they're going to have to make this trek to Aslan across many things. It's a big land. And at this point, because they're there and Aslan has returned, because the prophecy is doing what the prophecy does, everything is melting and spring is starting to sort of show its face in very small ways.
Yeah, the book actually notes, Chapter 12, transition from January to May. Weather-wise, that is how fast acting this.
I mean,
fact
and you
that
see
Aslan
that
has returned.
You see that in the adaptations, which we'll talk about, but that's very aggressive. And so on their way to meet Aslan, they run into someone who gives them some gifts.
Father Christmas,
because they have Christmas in Narnia, but they haven't had Christmas in a very long time.
Yes,
because
it was always winter, never Christmas.
Which is so sad.
Which the fact that they when they run into Father Christmas, they first initially think that it's the White Witch, because she always would her sleigh would always have bells on it, which is obviously very similar to how Father Christmas would be. So it makes them nervous, but the gifts that Father Christmas gives are very practical gifts, not, oh, here's a new bicycle for Christmas. What
would they do with that in Narnia?
I don't even know.
No real roads.
But Peter gets a sword and a shield, so he is ready for battle. And then the gifts that Susan and Lucy are given also would help in battle, but they are explicitly told that they should not be in battle, which I think is very interesting. And
Yeah.
I'm sure some of that is just because of the time period that it was written in, that wasn't what was expected. And obviously they all do their part and they do their own thing when it actually comes time for battle. But essentially, I think really what Father Christmas was getting at was that the girls should not be on the front lines. They have other strengths that would be beneficial elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because Susan's given a bow and arrow, for heaven's sakes. How you really expect her to not be in battle? And
She's gonna be in battle, but she's gonna be in the back of the battle, being like, "Bow, bow." That's how bow and arrows sound. Just FYI. You heard it here first.
And I'm interested to see what you do for this next one. Where
horn.
she's also given a horn that will always, every time she blows it, help will come to her.
I can make a horn noise. Burr, burr.
It's actually probably not far off of what it actually sounded like.
Yeah, no,
at least
I
one
watched
of the adaptations.
I watched the movie yesterday, so
Nice.
in order to get back into it, because I'd already seen it, and then I was like, oh no, I need to do it again.
And then Lucy's given a dagger and then a cordial that has healing powers.
Mm-hmm. Which I like the idea of giving a maybe 8-year-old a dagger. I really appreciate that, Father Christmas. Thank you.
I mean, it's not like she would be able to hold a sword.
No, I just like that he's like, you still need to protect yourself, so here's a dagger.
They make it to the stone table. We learn that there's deep magic that involves the stone table. And because of the choices that Edmund made, he is supposed to die on said stone table.
Mm-hmm.
But Aslan makes a deal that we don't actually know about until a little bit later that spares Edmund's life. In all honesty, I hate the stone table part of the book and adaptations, but at the same time, I really appreciate it. And I think this is more of me appreciating it as an adult, knowing the things that I know and having the thought processes that I do about it. Because as a kid, it just always made me uncomfortable.
It's very mob mentality.
But it is very, very much a picture of Jesus's journey to the cross.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
It before Aslan gets on the stone table, it is all of the Romans mocking Jesus and pretty much just putting him down and beating him up. And then the whole stone table event is the crucifixion. And then you find out about the deeper magic that brings Aslan back to life. In this case, we don't have to wait 3 days for that to happen. It just happens. And it's the connection of someone who is completely blameless being taking the place of someone who actually probably deserved said.
Well, I will say, I feel like I learned this, and I don't know where I learned this. But doesn't the stone table represent the tablets that Moses brought down that the 10 Commandments were then put on?
If it does, I absolutely missed that.
I mean, I don't think you would get that out of reading the book. I feel like that would have to be a little bit more. I feel like that's a PhD of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I don't know where I learned that, and I could be really wrong.
I've never heard that, but also the times that I've actually sat in classes that have talked about it, I was 12.
Yeah.
So they're not going to share that with a 12-year-old.
No, and I feel like I probably learned that in some weird research I decided to do at 18 or something, but I feel like it represented the stone tablets because the 10 Commandments would have been the breaking of the stone table, to me at least, would represent the almost the break between the Old Testament and the New Testament of the older, stricter times into the New Testament where Jesus is what he is. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I mean, I can see that, but I do not know. I do know what you mean, but I don't know that for a fact that is what that is.
I wonder if I've just made that up in my head.
And then the ending of the book is the Pevensies being crowned, and then you get to hear a little bit about their reign and then their journey back through the wardrobe and
Which is
telling
so
the professor
sad
all
in the
about it.
adaptations. I always think about at the end of the adaptations, how, especially like watching the movie yesterday, how like they just essentially disappear back into the wardrobe. At least in that adaptation.
Which one?
2005.
Okay, that's what I thought you were talking about, but at
Yeah.
the same time,
And every time I've ever seen that one, I'm always like, man, how must the Narnians have felt when they just didn't come back from hunting?
That's always been a thing that's in the back of my brain of like,
Because you never get to see that, because you see the what happens much later because of that.
Right. I want to say in Caspian they might tackle that topic a little bit.
They sort of talk about it.
But it's also been a while since I've read Caspian, so.
Yeah, truly, we haven't. That's another discussion.
Exactly, another discussion for another day. But before we dive into the adaptations, I do want to note that the rights to actually making adaptations was not sold until right before Lewis's death in the 60s. And the reason why is because he did not like the idea of them not being, quote, true to life. At the time of when a lot of things were being made, especially with all of like the talking animals and whatnot that exist in Narnia, it would have been people in like animal costumes.
They didn't have the ability to CGI the way that we can today.
They didn't have the technology to do it, which and we'll get to more of that, but like that was one of the things that as I didn't know until I was doing a little bit of research into this, that was a thing. So no one was allowed to make any adaptation until after C.S. Lewis died. And he said, okay, you can have the rights.
You can do it now.
From what I found, there are only 4 adaptations of this novel. Mm-hmm. First one being a TV series from 1967, which I couldn't find anywhere to watch and see. But it was directed by Helen Strandage, I think is how you say her last name.
Okay.
And it was written for screen by Trevor Preston. There are 10 episodes. And from the research that I did, only 2 of those 10 have actually survived. So I think if you could find any of it anywhere, you'd only get 2 of the episodes. And I have no idea which 2.
That would be so sad.
It would. Because if you really think about it, 1967 isn't that long ago. It's not like we're at like 100 years where, okay, like that makes sense. Like
nowhere near it.
Right. Like we're not even like 60 years out from it.
No, that is crazy.
But it's interesting to think that only 2 have survived.
Huh. Makes me very sad for her.
Mm-hmm. Then in 1979, there was a TV movie made, and it was animated. It was directed by Bill Melendez, and he also wrote it with David Connell and Ralph Wright. And it was released April 1st, 1979, in both the US and the UK. And I think this is probably the reason why when I tried to watch it, because I did find a spot to watch it, and I couldn't bring myself to get through it. For the US version, they dubbed those voices with American voices instead of leaving it to be British.
Wrong. It's set in England.
It is.
They're from Finchley? Finchley.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I can't be from Finchley with this accent.
Nope, not at all.
I love how I just dramatized as Southern just slightly there.
Yeah, your draw came out just a hair.
Just a little bit. That's annoying.
Yeah, and I don't know why they decided that was a good idea.
I don't know. They think kids are stupid. We're not. Just FYI.
And then after that, in 1988, we have a BBC miniseries that is 6 episodes long that was directed by Marilyn Fox and written by Alan Seymour. I was able to watch that, and I have relatively vivid memories of going to Blockbuster and renting this adaptation.
Girl, you just aged the hell out of both of us. I like that. I mean, BBC always does. I very rarely have a lot of problems with any out of their adaptations.
So, from a content perspective, they were spot on. From a casting perspective, I had issues.
Okay, tell me about them. Now I have to go watch it so I can try and see if I agree or disagree with you.
So, for starters, and I looked at like each of the actors who like portrayed the Pevensies to see like what their ages were. Literally, the age difference from the actor, like from the actors' ages, from Peter to Lucy was 2 years.
That's really close.
It is. They literally look so close in age. Like, I honestly could not tell you if Edmund or Peter was older. Like, Lucy was the only one who clearly looked the youngest, but that's because of the way that her like facial expressions were,
Yeah.
as well as just like her facial features gave her that very much a child, like had that childlike wonder.
And I just feel like that there has to be a distinction between Edmund and Peter because of the way that they act towards each other.
Yes.
They are very clearly older brother, younger brother. So you have to be able to get that from just looking at them.
Right. But Peter, Susan, and Edmund were all very similar in height, which also is not something that happens specifically with boys. Because boys
they
grow
suddenly start to shoot
very
up.
fast. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As you have two brothers.
Exactly. I'm the shortest because I have brothers. Like,
I remember, like, because I've known your family obviously for a long time. I just remember your younger brother, and then like suddenly I saw a picture of him one day, and I was like, "Who is that?
exactly.
Who is that tall person?"
He's the tallest of us all,
Which is funny.
And to an extent, the actress who plays Lucy, Sophie Wilcox, she almost seemed too childlike for my taste. And I don't know.
Almost like babyish.
Like, I mean, she still had some of like the baby fat in her face and whatnot, like, which is not a problem. It just, in the way that she acted, it felt like she was acting younger than she was.
Okay.
And it's not and it's not in the same way of where obviously it's super common where you have 20 somethings playing high school students.
No, it's different though when you're like 12 trying to play like 7 or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's almost like the point that you were making with Claire Danes playing Beth.
I will never be over that. Never.
And literally, like, Susan honestly looks the oldest of them all, and she's the second born. And so it was very much a, like, from that perspective alone, I wasn't necessarily sold. Now, granted, this is me looking at it from my 28-year-old perspective. I couldn't even begin to tell you what I thought the first time I saw it as a kid. And in all honesty, I probably just accepted it because it was what we had.
Yeah, you were like, this is good.
It's what I got.
I have nothing else.
Which is honestly probably the way I felt about a lot of adaptations that I saw when I was a kid.
Yeah, this is so interesting for how... I mean, obviously it hasn't been readily available to adapt for that long, but like that we have only 4 and that even the 4th one is never finished is really interesting considering how, I mean, this is not a non-popular book, right? It's not obviously as widely popular as Harry Potter, but like, so it's interesting to me that like, and I will never understand why it never got finished.
Funding.
Yeah, that's so sad.
That's honestly like the thing of it. It was funding. And then when Lucy first gets into Narnia, it's so not magical. It's not a magical experience. Like literally, she goes into the wardrobe, sniffs some of the coats, which seems weird to me anyways. And then all of a sudden, you know, lights just appear, which signify that, oh, she's found Narnia.
Huh.
Like, it's a, oh, hey, look, there are lights that showed up. Maybe I should go towards the light. Instead of, oh, like she's just walking through, like, because like in the book, Lucy is like going through the wardrobe, feeling all the coats because fur coats feel nice, and she's a child. Like you expect that of a child.
And then she suddenly like feels that it's cold and there is snow and it's
like she feels the branches of the
that
trees.
There's light.
And,
yeah.
Like it's a full blown discovery, not a
rather than just
I'm
like light.
Like I'm standing here feeling a coat and poof, there's light.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It was not magical, but I'm sure also part of that is because it was the 80s and they only had so much to do.
Yeah, that's true.
When Lucy and Tumnus first meet, Lucy seems to already know what a fawn is.
How do you already know what a fawn is? Sorry.
Like, literally in the book, Lucy asks the question, "What are you?"
What are you? What are you?
Like, she doesn't know. Because she's a child.
Yeah, why would you know?
It's not like she's in a spot.
Like a widely known thing in the 40s what a fawn was.
And I mean, like, even though she does go to school, it's not like they would have reached that point of like mythological creatures.
No, she's perhaps 8 years old.
I was like, unless there's something about British schooling that I don't know that, you actually learn mythological creatures at the age of 8.
Any British people that listen to us and you want to let us know if you learned about fawns when you were about 8 years old, please tell us. We'd love to hear it.
There seems to be a clunky way of going from like, instead of starting with a daughter of Eve, Mr. Thomas goes, well, are you human? And then he just like throws in the term daughter of Eve later, like we're supposed to know, that those are the same thing.
That's interesting.
That's more on the writing than
anything else. Yeah.
Than anything else. Going into like the lullaby that happens when she's having tea with Tumnus, literally it goes from Tumnus struggling to explain why it's winter, and then he just picks up the flute and starts playing. It feels so clunky that it's just like, there's clunky, no
clunky writing. It's like they wrote it the way that they wanted to do it, and then somebody went in and like took out important things. And they were like, we don't need this movement. We don't need that line.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Like this is one of the rare moments where I'm actually like not super thrilled with the BBC and how they adapted things.
Huh. I need to watch it.
Just because there's so many things that it's like, wait, why did we get there? How did we get there? Barbara Kellerman, who plays the White Witch in this adaptation, she has just such peculiar facial expressions. Like her eyes get really big always before she speaks. And it's like, do you have something that's like poking you in the side and like that's making you uncomfortable and that's why your face looks that way? Like, I don't even understand. And then she always sounds like she's angry. There is no like nurturing side, which I always perceived like her interaction with Edmund to be that like half anger, half, well, let me entice you and nurture you so you actually like me.
It's almost like that, I'm going to pretend to be its mother for a second, kind of like. It's almost as if she's like, I'm going to try to be maternal.
Right.
Almost that like uncomfortableness of like, I am trying to show you love, child kind of thing.
And that just does not exist in Kellerman's portrayal of the White Witch. And then the magic is so 80s.
I mean, I expected that though.
And it's one of those things where like it's passable,
but it's still 80s.
It's still so 80s, and it just makes me laugh. And they added a tent like to the whole Edmund witch scene, which I know does not exist in the book. I always read that section as it's all happening on the sleigh. With the way that they have the professor in this one, I'm not sure that I believe that this professor is Diggory Kirke. And the only reason why I think that's important is because Diggory Kirke was the main character from The Magician's Nephew.
Yeah.
And that's how the wardrobe came to exist.
Do they not call him Professor Kirke?
No. He's just the professor. And there's literally nothing that makes me believe that he is Diggory Kirke.
But that's such an important part of it because he believes Lucy.
Yeah.
About the wardrobe because he knows what's in the wardrobe.
Right.
He's like, oh my God, she found it.
That's not the impression that I get in this adaptation.
Not here for that.
So, and in this one, instead of because if I remember correctly, I don't know that actually any of the adaptations that I watched got this right. In the book, what drives the four Pevensies into the wardrobe that gets all four of them into Narnia is they hear Mrs. McCready giving a tour of the house, because that's a common thing, especially during that time. In the 80s, it was the girls ran into Mrs. McCready giving a tour, which then caused them to run. And because they weren't supposed to interfere with that.
Yeah. No, none of the adaptations.
And so none of the adaptations get that right. But I don't know that that's crucial. It's just interesting seeing how
they have to end up all in the wardrobe together.
Yes.
How you get them there, you do you.
Yep. And then obviously, because this is the 80s and they don't necessarily have the CGI capabilities, the people in animal costumes is just weird.
Yeah.
It was always weird watching the transition from the wolf being a man in a wolf's costume to being an animated wolf, because they had that little like Mary Poppins-ish thing of, you had the animated things. That's how they got like the mythical creatures in there, of like the griffin and whatnot. Like that's how they got those sorts of creatures on screen. Aslan himself is this giant puppet that's honestly a little terrifying.
I've seen the puppet. I please, anybody out there, Google Aslan puppet. It's great fun. It's terrifying.
Like he looks like
weird.
He looks like a obscenely large stuffed animal that is not meant to be a stuffed animal.
That you're like, what would I even do with that? That would eat me. It's a stuffed animal.
Right. And there are some moments when the voiceover that happens, so that way Aslan can actually like speak, they have a little bit of like lion noises that like go into it. And it's like, this doesn't sound right.
He only uses his lion noises when he wants to.
Like the voice itself already does not work for me.
Yeah.
When the Pevensies get crowned, they get magically placed on their heads.
Oh, no, just put it on there. We don't have time for that.
It's so weird. And then there isn't really you don't get to see the Pevensies like going for the white stag, which is, it's during that hunt for the white stag that they end up going back into the real world. Mr. Tumnus actually just like tells that part of the story, and we get to watch the Pevensies play on the beach while they're children. And so I guess it was to save them from having to cast adult versions.
Yeah.
And then the Pevensies tell the professor, and that is the end of the 6 episodes.
Well, that's an adaptation right there.
Yep. And now we're at the last adaptation, which is the 2005 adaptation, which, in my opinion, of the 4 that exist, it's the best one that's done.
Yeah,
some of that is technology, and some of that is also just the way that they actually went about things.
I liked the 2005. Again, I would wish they had kept going.
Now, before this one got the green light to be made, C.S. Lewis's stepson, who is the executor of the estate, had to approve the adaptation, and so they had to show him what kind of CGI would be used.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool.
Yeah, I mean, be like, here's how we make a lion. Do you remember that puppet from the 80s? We're doing it better.
So this adaptation was made by Walden Media and Disney. The director was Andrew Adamson, which this was his live action directorial debut. And then he co-wrote it with Anne Peacock, Christopher Marcus, and Stephen McFeely. Our 4 Pevensies, Peter is played by William Moseley, Susan is played by Anna Popplewell, Skander Keynes plays Edmund, and Lucy is played by Georgie Henley.
Mm-hmm. Which I think this, if you're going to go by casting alone, it's probably the best casting they've done for the kids. But I mean, again, there's only 4 places to look for it, so.
Which William Moseley beat out 3,000 other boys for the role of Peter Pevensey.
I used to have such a crush on him as a kid.
I don't know too many females that did not.
He's just so, he's got like blonde hair and he's just cute.
Like, I saw this movie several times in theaters.
Me too.
And after one of the times seeing the group of girls that I had gone to see it with, they were constantly talking about Peter the Magnificent, fully meaning William Moseley.
He's a cutie patootie. He's still a cutie patootie. He looks almost exactly the same, except that he's older.
Which William and Anna actually had known each other from another audition because they auditioned for Ron and Hermione.
I'm glad that didn't happen.
Can you imagine?
No offense to them, but I'm glad that didn't happen.
I can't see William as Ron. I could maybe see Anna as Hermione.
Maybe. It's a hard maybe.
Yeah.
Huh.
But the White Witch is played by Tilda Swinton, which she
fabulous.
is phenomenal.
Oh my God.
Mr. Tumnus is James McAvoy.
This was like probably the first thing that I recognized James McAvoy in. That I was like, that's James McAvoy.
Uh-huh.
That you look back at it and you're like, he played Mr. Tumnus.
And then Aslan was voiced by Liam Neeson.
Which is such a good choice.
And I'm really glad that that was the choice that ended up happening because it was almost Gerard Butler.
He's not old enough. Is that mean for me to say? No offense to Liam Neeson.
The reason why he ended up not being the voice of Aslan is because he didn't want it to be like the 80s puppet. He's like, if this is what that is, then I don't want anything to do with it.
He's not old enough. I'm saying it not offensively to Mr. Liam Neeson, who is fabulous. But like, Aslan needs to be like wise, and no offense to Gerard Butler, he doesn't always come off as wise when he speaks. All right. Well, now
that is one of the things that I am concerned because I know that Netflix has gotten the rights in order to develop the whole Chronicles of Narnia series. And I'm concerned as to what will happen with Aslan specifically because Liam Neeson was such an excellent Aslan.
What if they just bring him back? Do you want to do it again?
I think they should, but I don't know if that's what will happen.
Nobody owns you, Liam Neeson, except for whoever makes the Taken movies. They obviously own you. I've never seen a single Taken movie, but I can reference almost all of them. Yeah.
And then another fun fact, Kate Winslet, Nicole Kidman, and Michelle Pfeiffer were all considered for the role of the White Witch.
I would have accepted Michelle Pfeiffer. She also gives face like Tilda Swinton does. But Tilda Swinton is the White Witch.
And she was first choice.
Yeah, she is fabulous as the White Witch.
Oh,
she
absolutely.
gives off that very cold.
She has that balance of cold heart, but can be nurturing when necessary.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I can just flick up my lips and you think I'm being nice to you. That's very Tilda Swinton. You know who could play, I think, a good White Witch now? I'm just fan casting my own one. Her name escapes me. Oh, no. She played Phasma in the Star Wars movies.
Gwendolyn Christie.
Thank you. I was going to call her Brienne of Tarth, and I went, that's a Game of Thrones reference. Yes. Not her name.
Yes, no. Gwendolyn Christie.
She'd be good.
She would be.
She'd be great. I think it's this stature, because Tilda Swinton's also very tall. And I feel like the White Witch, it works really well that she's so massive. Not in a mean way.
Which they stuck her on platforms.
Yeah.
So that way she would be taller.
Not only is she already massive, they made her more massive because she's sort of supposed to be this like foreboding wall.
She's half giant.
Almost. Yeah.
Like the book tells us that she's half giant.
So I think that would really work. I'm fan casting the Netflix Narnia. I'm trying to figure out who's going to play who.
Which one of the things that I think is interesting in the way that the 2005 like sets the stage is it opens with World War II air raids.
Yeah,
in
the
London,
bombing.
because that's the whole reason why the Pevensies are being sent away, and we're only told that in the novel. So actually getting to see that, I think it changes like the way you perceive things.
And you also get sort of a small introduction to each of the characters, specifically Edmund and Peter, during that raid, because Edmund runs back to get the picture of their dad, and Peter goes and gets him, brings him into the bomb shelter, and essentially is like, "You're so stupid. What are you doing?"
Mhm.
And that sort of gives you their relationship for the rest of the movie until you get towards the end.
And this is the only adaptation where we actually get to see Mrs. Pevensey.
Mm-hmm.
Because while the 80s adaptation like opens with them with the Pevensies at the train station, you don't get to see Mrs. Pevensey like shipping
Say goodbye.
them off.
Yeah.
Like it's literally watching them get on the train. And this one you actually get to see her like put the tags on the kids and like watch them get on the train. And
Which, what a world, man.
I could not imagine what that would actually be like.
Put your kids on a train to the country so that they don't die.
Right.
It's insanity.
And Elizabeth Hawthorne is the person who plays Mrs. McCready, and she is excellent because she gives you that perception that she is going to be a very hard to get along with person, but with the right words, she's a softie.
I love when she pulls up to the train station to pick them up, and she's like, "So where are the rest of your things?" And they're like, "It's just us." And she's like, "Okay, well, that's good, I guess." I'm like, "Okay, that's nice of you to say."
Go.
I would see why children would be scared of her.
Yes.
When Lucy first enters the wardrobe, they're playing hide and seek because it is raining outside, and they're bored of the game that Susan has come up with.
Which I will point out that is one of the ways, like from the book, that they get it, but it's not the first
the second
one.
time. Yeah,
it's the second time that's how they get in there. And so I think it's fine that they like that they did it that way. I don't think it's necessarily crucial. Like you have to do it the exact same way. But
yeah.
But the way that they shoot this scene of Lucy finding the wardrobe, it is so beautifully shot. And it just gets you excited between the music and the angles and like the interspersing of like slow motion with like normal. It's just,
and the hand
beautiful.
Reaching out, she touches the branch and the branch has snow on it. I'm like, it's amazing. It's like so cool.
Which this is how much detail the designers put into this and how well this adaptation truly set up for the whole series to be done. The things that are carved on the wardrobe are from The Magician's Nephew.
They are. Go find a picture of it. It's great.
When Lucy actually like enters in Narnia, that was all her genuine reaction. Like they blindfolded her on the day that they shot that so she wouldn't see any of it.
Georgie Henley as a child is like, "We're putting a blindfold on me."
So like, and she had also never seen James McAvoy in his
I
costume.
knew that.
And so like everything about that like interaction with Tumnus and just her whole like entering in Narnia for the first time in general, that was all a genuine reaction. And I always think it's great when you can pull out genuine.
It's so cool. And so the second time they go into the wardrobe, it's Lucy and Edmund, and essentially it's just late at night and they go in their pajamas. And Edmund,
I think it's to an extent playing at that idea that Lucy's wanting to make sure that she didn't just like dream it all.
Yeah.
That is something that like the book tackles. And so she just like can't sleep one night. And so she goes and hops in the wardrobe.
And Edmund follows, but not too closely.
I think the way that they have specifically Lucy's second entrance, I really appreciate that. It's like she has a candle and when she opens it, and then like the wind just blows out the candle.
That's like one of the first shots of the trailer.
And it's
so her good. Opening the wardrobe and it blows out the candle. I remember watching that when it was like on TV. I mean, like, I gotta go see this movie.
Yeah. And I will say, when Edmund is in Narnia, the entrance of the White Witch just feels more dramatic
Oh yeah,
than
with the
any
sleigh
other.
and her little minion yelling at him.
Oh my gosh. And the magic in this one is honestly flawless.
Oh, when he's playing the little lute and the fire starts to dance.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. And like the drums in the background. Dun, 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 dun. I was like, this is what I needed.
Like, the soundtrack of this is just absolutely beautiful, and I love it. But like when the White Witch creates the Turkish delight and the drink, like it's
very cool.
It's very well done. And you can also see like Edmund become visibly paler.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is something that's noted, but I don't know that it's ever been truly done up until the 2005, as far as live action goes, of actually seeing the visible shift in Edmund because he ate and drank of the White Witch's magic.
Yeah.
Jim Broadbent is the person who plays Professor Kirk in this adaptation, and he is honestly the best Professor Kirk.
I love when when Lucy cries because of Edmund, which,
Mhm.
you know, it's just a theme.
Yeah.
When Susan and Peter are in the office with him, and Peter's like, she said she's found something in the wardrobe, and the professor's like, the wardrobe? I love his whole reaction to that.
His whole body just shifts.
So he plays that so well because he's suddenly like, it's time. It has happened.
It's happened again. Yeah.
Because, you know, he can't go into the wardrobe anymore. Doesn't work for him, which is the magic of Narnia that, you know, eventually it stops working for you, which is in a lot of ways, I think what that quote that you mentioned is C.S. Lewis is essentially saying, maybe one day.
One day you'll be old enough again.
Yeah.
Which I will just note that Jim Broadbent is Professor Slughorn.
He is. Fabulous actor.
Which, because I couldn't think of why, when I was rewatching it recently, I was like, why does this voice sound familiar? This person doesn't look familiar, but this voice sounds familiar.
He looks
with all
crazy.
of the hair. Oh, yeah.
He looks crazy. Not that he doesn't look crazy as Slughorn, but like he looks crazy.
It's a different kind of crazy.
As Professor Kirk. Yeah, it was so interesting watching it again and being like, oh, I can hear that voice. And when I was watching it, I had a moment. I was like, who is that? And Rupert Everett plays the fox at the beginning. And he is, he's been on a million different things. My Best Friend's Wedding. He was in The Importance of Being Earnest with Colin Firth, which I love that movie. There's so many like different little moments of, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I know this person. It's truly a star-studded cast. At the time, was not as star-studded,
right? But during this this like little conversation between Peter, Susan, and the professor, this is really one of the scenes that like start driving this one aspect of Susan that I really hate that they did this to her character.
Oh, okay, so this is what we were going to talk about.
Of making her more logical.
She's very logical in this adaptation. Everything is about logic. And they call her out on it too. And I'm like, did y'all do this just so you could get these jokes in here?
But the thing is, she's logical in the book, but not this kind of logical.
No.
When they like actually get into Narnia, in the book, Susan makes the argument for the fact that, oh, well, if they take the coats and these boots that are in the wardrobe out, like, so that way they are like properly dressed for the winter weather, they're not technically taking them out of the wardrobe. Because if you think about it, this world exists inside the wardrobe. But in this adaptation, it's Peter who makes that argument. And it makes me mad that they like did that to her character, because that it paints her in a completely different way than what she actually is.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. You only need to have one Pevensey that you have issues with, and that is Edmund, because he has already made bad choices. It felt like they were like grasping at something else that did not exist.
Did you also notice in the scene with the professor and Susan and Peter he's smoking a pipe, and the container from which he pulls the tobacco is a silver apple, which is another reference to The Magician's Nephew.
Yes.
They really did a good job at referencing something that essentially we didn't think we were going to get to see. And at this point, we may never see. Still mad about it.
When they get into Narnia for the third time, this time it's all four of them, what drives them in there is that they were playing cricket and they accidentally break a window.
They were trying to hide, and I think that, you know, I mean, you've done something bad.
And to an extent, it almost feels like Edmund was trying to get them back in there.
Yeah, because he like sort of pushes them into that room.
And specifically into the wardrobe. Because with that specific way that they did it, I don't know if it was absolutely necessary that they hopped into the wardrobe.
I mean, you're right, but I do think, again, that was Edmund's. The White Witch told me if I bring my siblings that I can have all the Turkish delight I want.
Yes. No, I
would
agree with that.
Whole room full of it.
But it's not like where in the book they're trying to get away from a group of tourists that are coming to see the house. So therefore, that feels like it has that level of, well, we need to make sure we're concealed even further on the off chance that they come in this room. This is we've done something bad and we've just got to hide.
And we just got to go.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't know that it actually like required that level of hiding.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's all for the sake of the narrative.
Yes. And I think when they finally like meet up with Mr. Beaver and he's taking them to their dam, I feel like to an extent with like the different glances and whatnot that Edmund does, he's almost giving away his plans and desires. And I don't know how much of that is they did that so as an audience we would know that he hadn't forgotten. But at the same time, it's like...
It was very direct because he like stands outside and Beaver's even like, what you doing there?
Enjoying the scenery, are we?
Yeah, like it's definitely... It's a little too on the nose.
Yeah. And honestly, one of the things I really appreciate about this entire adaptation is the level of bluntness that just exists from the characters in Narnia that are on, like really just in general. Because you have like Tumnus when Lucy has tea with him the first go around, that he's like, no, like this is the reason why I consider myself to be a bad fawn. Like he's very honest. He doesn't try to sugarcoat it. The wolf, Mogrim, when Edmund comes to the White Witch's castle, he's like fortunate favorite of the queen, or else unfortunate.
Yeah.
Like there is so much directness that I appreciate because it's not like they're trying to hide anything.
No, they really truly weren't. I think they were very conscious of this is what it is. We've been doing this for years.
Right.
This is what it is.
And I think the whole like scene of Edmund like trying out the throne is just funny.
He looks so small in that scene.
He does.
He's like, this will be where I will sit. And you're like, no, that's not at all what she said. You could have Turkish delight, bruh. She said you could like kind of be royalty. Chill. Take a chill pill. You got to know who she is. She's very direct despite the like slight warming of her. She's still direct about who she is.
In this adaptation, they essentially like shackle Edmund and throw him into the dungeon, which I don't quite remember if they stuck him in the dungeon or whatnot, but they utilize that moment to, in a way, kind of show like the turning point of Edmund, because Mr. Tumnus is also there. At that point, he hadn't been turned to stone. And so I think it was a cool moment that they added, because I don't remember that being something that was in the book, but I liked it.
I think it's interesting because of course, again, I will talk about how I like this movie and I wish that it had gone on. because this was like the third most successful film of 2005 when it came out, and when it was released on DVD in 2007, it was the most successful release of that year.
I think the transition from winter to spring that they do is just, I think it's beautiful because it's not a boom, here we are into spring.
No.
It's a gradual like change.
Yeah, like you start to see like the flowers are blooming through even the snow and the ice, and so it's definitely, and it's very dramatic with the river and the ice cracking, and then him losing Lucy, and he just holds up her
Has
coat.
anyone seen my coat?
I just love Susan's like, what have you done? I'm like, what did he do? He was trying to help. Like, I'm so sorry that her coat came off. It's a big coat.
So like when they meet Aslan and whatnot, like just the colors and everything of like the camp and just the whole like experience, it feels regal. But then you have awkward Peter who just like holds out the sword and goes, "We've come to see Aslan." And it looks so awkward.
I think William Moseley really played into the sort of awkwardness that Peter was like, I have to be king. I have to be the high king too. Like, I think he literally played so hard into Peter would have no clue what to do.
But that just seemed so out there. I feel like, especially with them being from England, they would have had a little bit more of a clue. I would think, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just, that, like, I remember thinking that was weird the first time I saw it, and I still think it's weird, like, years later.
Yeah.
But I will say the Peter's fight with the wolf is, like, it's such an important moment, specifically for Peter's storyline, but the way that they did it was done so much better than the 80s adaptation, just because you had the taunting and whatnot, where the 80s is like everything is red, and because it's a man in a human suit, like a man in a human suit because it's a man in a wolf suit, it just doesn't look realistic, which obviously you don't expect it to be all that realistic, but when it looks like the wolf is choking you out, I'm sorry, it's not even on the like spectrum of believable.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And so this one was at least believable. And I think the fear is always present. Specifically on Peter's face in those kinds of moments. And I think honestly it's very fair, because who would not be fearful when your sisters have been like scared up a tree because a wolf is threatening to kill them.
Yeah, and I feel like Peter just stays scared this whole movie, because like not only is all of this stuff happening to him, he also has to like deal with the fact that he's the oldest of 4, and he's like, I got these 3 other people I gotta deal with. I'm so tired. I feel like Peter got gray hair after
Probably.
like, very quickly. He was like, I've gone gray. Even though like later we do see in older versions of them, and he still has very regal blonde hair.
I think in this adaptation, we get to see how Lucy is really like the most forgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Because like, obviously when they get in for the 3rd time, she mocks them a little bit with like I'm sure you're just imagining things.
She's like standing there in the snow like, it'd be a dream.
Some children just don't know when to stop pretending.
Yes, I love it.
Oh man. And like it's when like Edmund returns, she's the first to give him a hug.
Yeah.
She's the first to like visibly welcome him back.
Yeah. I think Lucy is definitely, I think, the most balanced character of the 4 of them, in that she lives on both sides of that spectrum, and she honestly stays that way through, at least in these adaptations, all 3 of the movies that we do get from these adaptations.
Yeah.
Which I think that was his point, because obviously Lucy is not the main character, but she is, I think, one of the more crucial, even of the four of them.
She's that like childlike faith that like in the Bible we're told to have.
Yeah, the book's almost about how important the childlike faith is.
It's an absolutely wonderful depiction of that. I think it's interesting when the White Witch comes to have the audience, where in the book, Aslan's like, well, assume that I don't know what the deep magic is. And even in the 80s, it's like, well, it's along that same vein. In this one, it's don't recite that magic to me. Like, you don't have to tell me.
Was written.
It's like, you don't have to tell me what it is. And that changes it, but you still get to learn what it is. Because
it's not like him saying that destroys what we're about to learn.
Right. Like, we still get to learn that the magic that is written on the stone table is that because Edmund is technically a traitor, he has to die because that is what the magic/law states.
Yes. Because all traitors belong to the White Witch.
Right. But that's not, like, Aslan's very much, don't tell me what it is. I know what it is.
What it says. I was there. And I wonder if that's like where I get the idea of the stone table being the difference between old and new, is that Aslan, in a way, by doing what he does, and even by sort of questioning why she would question his knowledge of the old magic, is saying the old magic doesn't work anymore. It is not the law anymore, and I'm going to show it to you.
Right.
By breaking your table.
Yes.
I'm breaking the table.
Yeah. Which that entire sequence, I feel like I remember being unnerved. I also remember some of the red flags, for lack of a better term, that were raised when this adaptation came out. Because there was concern of like Tumnus meeting Lucy. It's like, because people perceive things that are not there. Like, there was perception that there was an actual like relationship between the two. That's not how that works. It's not how the book was, but whatever. That was one of the things I remember that like being something that I saw, because I read so much about the movie beforehand because I was so excited that the movie was coming out, because it's my favorite series. Not my favorite book in the series, but it's my favorite series.
What is wrong with people? Sorry. I've had an existential crisis hearing that some people thought that was a thing.
And then with the specific scene, like with the stone table scene, I want to say that was another thing that like pushed it into being a PG rated movie instead of it being G, which in all honesty, like, it should never have ever been considered G, because there's just a lot of heavier things that get discussed, but that's just because life in general is heavy and you need a little bit of guidance to go through it.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and that scene definitely is not G in any capacity, because it's almost like it plays on the sort of like mentality of like what people thought witches used to do. Mm-hmm. That we used to go into the woods and just frolic naked, and we used to just, drink blood and like do, I don't know.
Right. Well, and it's in the scene that this is the first time we see the White Witch in something other than white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which was weird. I remember watching it and being like, I don't like it.
But like it shows it like helps punctuate the significance of the scene in a way.
Yes. And also even of the changing seasons that she's essentially had to change because it is no longer cold enough.
Right.
Yeah.
And the creatures just look more terrifying. Like the coloration of everything is like it
the way they filmed it.
It like, because you have different close-ups, and especially when it gets to the witch stabbing Aslan. Like the fact that they did that, they had it as it was a close-up of the White Witch's face, and then it's a close-up of Aslan's face. Like you never actually like actively see the dagger. It's such a creative way to like still get the point across without showing it.
Blatantly showing her murdering a lion.
Right.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, the other thing that I I still don't know that I have a complete idea of like how close Susan and Lucy actually were during that moment, but it always, like, with the way that things were shot and the way that they reacted, it always felt like they were closer than they actually were.
Yeah. Because obviously they couldn't get too close because then people would be like, look, let's just kill them too while they're here.
Right. After that happens, when Peter is getting ready to go into battle and he knows that, like, Aslan's not going to be there, I think it's such a great character shift that Edmund gives him a pep talk of like, no, dude, you can do it.
Yeah. He's suddenly like, Aslan told you that this was possible. Like, you know that you can do this. It definitely, there's definitely a bond strengthened in that moment. And the whole movie strengthens the bond of the four of them, which again, you get to see later.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an incredible shift from the beginning of the movie. Edmund, who was very selfish and kind of greedy, and I think just angry that at their situation and at the idea of Peter thinks he's dad and he's not dad, and then I think he sort of sees what Peter has had to do during all of being in a war, and now they're in a war again. Just
Right.
parallels.
I think it's such a great choice of a line at the end of the battle, when it's like finally done, that Aslan says it is finished.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this adaptation just did a really good job of not like stripping Aslan of any of the biblical connections that are meant to exist.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
because in the 80s, I don't feel like that's how that went.
Anybody who's read any shred of the Bible, specifically, obviously, New Testament, understands this is exactly what this is referencing.
Yes.
There is no way of reading Aslan going to sacrifice himself over Edmund and not being like, oh, yeah. And the walk up to the stone table and that whole thing is very, I can remember watching like The Passion of the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very reminiscent of that.
Absolutely. And it has similar colors to it now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, no, if you think about it, it's very similar.
And those came out not that far apart.
No, not really.
With the crowning at Cair Paravel, the costuming is gorgeous. And I love that they're all different colors. That, like, because in the 80s, they have them all in the same color scheme. And almost all in the exact same costume. But in this one, it almost individualizes them more, which I think is great. And then if you look at the thrones, they each have something different carved into it. And for Peter, Susan, and Lucy, it's their like specific thing that they were given by Father Christmas. But because Edmund wasn't present for that, that's not what's there for him. I think it's just another sword is what they did.
I think there's the stylistic choice of making them all look a little different is that and they allude to it, they're sort of the 4 points of a compass. They're 4 separate people who make up one important thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a stylistic choice by the costume designers to be like, okay, well, obviously, and you can see they still match in the style and the specific intricacies of their outfits, but they are different.
Well, like, and even if you look at the crowns, like the crowns match, but the difference is Edmund and Lucy's are silver, or Susan and Peter's are gold.
Yes, because apparently, I would want to wear a silver one, so thank you for that. I don't wear gold. It's not a good look for me.
I don't know. And in this one we have the chasing of the white stag, and I honestly think that they casted the older versions of the Pevensies really well. Now, obviously, they could not get more spot on than Lucy's, but
I was about to say, I mean, Dorothy Hanley's older sister played older Lucy.
Exactly. It's like that.
I think her name was Rachel.
Yeah.
Rachel Henley. Yeah, like they could not have gotten more spot on than finding her older sister to play her.
Right.
And they did do a good job. And you see in that moment the bond that you'll then see later again that Narnia created for them.
Mm-hmm.
An experience that only they have experienced. That they know of, at least.
And then I just love it when they come out of the wardrobe, that the professor like comes in the room and he's like, "What are you all doing in the wardrobe?"
Yeah.
And then Peter's like, "You wouldn't believe us if we told you." And he like throws him the cricket ball. It's like, "Try me." And I also love that like after you get a little bit ways through the credits, that comes back and Lucy comes back like she's gonna try and get in to try the wardrobe again, and the professor's in there. And he's like, "It's not gonna work. I tried."
It's sad. You sort of see the sadness in him of
him, like how badly he wants to go back.
Yeah, how badly he would love to go back to Narnia and cannot go back. And that is obviously again another callback to the magician's nephew, because at that point, unless you've read the books, you have no idea that
you don't have any clue as to why this man wants to go.
Yeah, you're like, why does he want to go to Narnia? He thinks it's cool. But like, you also don't understand that at this point he has no way to get back to Narnia.
Mm-hmm.
My only assumption would be that when he dies, they could go back to Narnia, because that's like philosophical and stuff. But again, that's never been like proven. So
right,
I would think that though.
It's all just so beautiful, and I love it. And I hate that they didn't get to complete the series.
Yeah, no, I'm very sad. And at this point, if they were gonna do it again, they'd have to recast it. So, I mean, great. Still, I mean, I could watch the 3 movies that we did get.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a beautifully made, like they really went all out on the magic part of this book and really wanted to create a world that would draw in the childlike nature in all of us.
But that's all that we have for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. If you haven't read it, you should read it.
Highly, highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
Yes. Obviously, with our group of thank yous, we clearly cannot thank C.S. Lewis enough for the world that he created.
Yes, thank you so much.
We are grateful that adaptations exist, but specifically the 2005.
Yes, thank you for all the other adaptations, but thank you a lot to Walden Media for really going for it.
Yeah.
And big thanks to Zakaka. We can never not thank Zakaka. It's the reason we have such beautiful artwork.
Which we use all the time.
We do. We'll constantly use this all over the place. Thanks for tuning in to League of Lit. If you have any suggestions for an episode, feel free to leave a comment on leagueoflit.tumblr.com.